Welcome back to Uncontested Investing. I'm Tim Harris. Thank you for swinging back by. Today, we have kind of an industry important person, Randy Miller. Randy, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I call you Randy, not Randall, like the company is, because we're friends.
My friends call me Randy. If you're not calling me Randy, you're not my friend.
So, real quick, 60 seconds. Let's just tell the audience a little bit about you.
I'm an attorney. I've been practicing for, I hate to admit it, but a little over 30 years now. My firm is 21 years old. I represent the default servicing segment of the mortgage industry. My offices are in Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Colorado, and Wyoming. I am currently the co-chair of the ALFN, which is the American Legal and Financial Network, which is the largest organization of attorneys that do what it is that I do for a living. So it's been fun. It's been interesting times.
So, okay, there's going to be a lot to unpack in that, but the first segment every week is called the bottom line up front. Let's face it, we're in an attention deficit society. A lot of people are going to start listening to this. They're going to get a phone call. They're going to stop and get gas, and then they're going to forget to turn it back on. So let's just take 2 minutes, share with the audience kind of the most important things happening today, things that investors or entrepreneurs should be focused on, paying attention to, avoiding, pursuing, just kind of, I guess, the cliff notes of the next 30 to 45 minutes of what we're going to talk about.
How about let's keep your watchers from getting sued? Let's start with that one.
Well, that will be the bottom line up front then. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Go.
Well, the two things that I think are most important to your viewers are this. We see that investors that are buying properties at auction, and they're taking steps that are actually illegal. They're evicting when they can't evict. They're throwing property into the streets. We just had a situation with a disabled veteran who was taken out of his house and locked out of his house while he was working on a deed in lieu because the investor that bought that note thought they owned it. But they don't own it. It's only an equitable interest. It is not converted to a pure ownership position at that point in time. So we're going to talk about that in a little more detail, keep them from getting sued. The second thing is, how do you know who to choose for default counsel when your note does go into default? There are a lot of different criteria that people should really be considering, and maybe who you're using isn't really the best choice for you at this point in time.
So, Randy, default servicing is one of those phrases that we throw around, those of us that have been doing this longer than a couple minutes, and the average investor may not fully understand what default servicing is, or even worse, there may be someone out there that's buying tax liens, tax deeds, non-performing notes, or even creating owner finance notes that may not understand how default servicing can play into not getting sued. Could you talk a little bit about what default servicing is and how it applies to kind of all areas of investing?
Well, you covered a whole lot of things, right? Because there's property preservation, for example. There's the attorney side of things. There's a number of different aspects, and certainly I'm not going to talk about prop pres because that's just not my background. But when it comes to the law side, there are also a number of other issues. There are other issues as far as the law goes, and I sort of mentioned that at the beginning. You know, what steps do you want to take? What steps don't you want to take? Let's go back to what you were talking about.
No, it's fine. A lot of people, I see it. It happens all the time in these little Facebook forums. Most recently, actually this morning, a friend of mine from Mastermind calls up. I'm looking at buying this 100-house portfolio, and there's these, most of them are owner finance notes, and some of them are in arrears. Can't I just foreclose? Like, he really jumped to the end of the story. And I was like, hey, buddy, we need to have a call because there's a lot of things you're not thinking about. And I'm not from South Carolina. I do financing in Texas, me personally. RCN, we're nationwide. But I was like, there's a lot more you're going to have to think about this than you can just foreclose. So for that customer out there that may be thinking about purchasing some non-performing notes, what are some things legally that people need to be aware of when trying to operate nationally?
So let's start with the fact that there are basically 3 different types of states when it comes to defaults. There are judicial states, there are non-judicial states, and there are trustee states. And the laws, although trustees are similar to non-judicial, it's a little bit different. So let's walk through. A judicial foreclosure is one where you actually file a lawsuit, as you do any other lawsuit, and you go through a court proceeding to foreclose. They're generally, in my office in Illinois and Wisconsin, which are both judicial states, we have 2 counts. One is a quiet title, and one is a foreclosure. In a non-judicial state, it's generally something that's called post and pub, meaning you're posting the notice on the door, and you're publishing in the newspaper. It depends on which state, for how many weeks you want to publish that. There are certain requirements for what information goes into the publication. Depends on which state you're in. There are times where if it's abandoned, we can accelerate redemption periods, for example, and you can do that in a non-judicial state. And the difference with a trustee state, like California, Nevada, all the West Coast states, and then Virginia on the East Coast, is that you don't need a lawyer. You're actually using a trustee. There does not have to be a lawyer to do that foreclosure. Now, if it gets to a bankruptcy or litigation, they're generally tied to other law firms, but the trustees themselves are not necessarily attorneys. So there are different things, there are different laws that apply, there are different timelines that apply. And, again, if we talk about which counsel to select, it depends on, well, how good are they at what they do, which state are you in? There are a lot of multi-state firms. I'm one of them, as a matter of fact. And, are we great in all of our things? Well, I can say yes, of course, but I can't say that about, some of my colleagues. And I'm obviously I'm kidding. But seriously, but some things, some have great operations in certain states, but they're not so great in other states. There was a point in time where I would not promote my Wisconsin office when we first started it because the attorney that was running it really did not run it well. Thank God we've cleaned that up. So now we are awesome in all of our states, of course. But timelines matter. How fast people are moving matters. Can we accelerate redemption matters. There's a lot of different pieces that go to it, and making sure it gets done right. And obviously, we have to order title right out of the black to make sure you even have a right to foreclose. And that comes back to what I want to talk about with these evictions that are going on with stuff that's being purchased at auction.
Are you familiar with subject twos? People that are buying houses subject to the existing mortgage?
I've heard the phrase. It doesn't really come up in our world too often.
So it's interesting. There's a lot of people out there that are saying that you can go get someone to deed you the house, and the deed is different than the mortgage, and you can separate those two.
Which actually comes to again that about buying these notes from the
That's
right?
Well,
because when you're buying a note, let's for example, if you're buying something in auction, again, you're not buying a house. You're buying the note, but it doesn't mean you own the property yet. And there are certain things that have to take place before you can make a move. And some of the stuff we're seeing out there right now, we're finding investors that are making moves on properties that they don't own. And I will tell you something, as a lawyer, you want to be on the other side of that case because you're going to kick somebody's butt and you're going to win a whole bunch of money against the investor that moved when they shouldn't have moved.
Because a lot of these things, you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
You cannot.
Once you've taken the wrong step, you're liable.
100%. 100%.
So I want to focus there because I like to scare people. No, I'm just kidding. What are some, let's start with these wrongful evictions.
Okay.
Because I see the right way to say this. There's a lot of maybe nonprofit type ambulance chasing attorneys out there that are really excited to dive into the letter of every law when it comes to foreclosure practices or eviction practices. What are some things you see people do wrong?
Well, let's start with what I've seen lately in particular, and that is you buy something at auction and you make a move to evict, let's say it hasn't even gone to sale yet in the foreclosure process, or it's in redemption. We're seeing quite a bit of that. Or in the case of the disabled vet that I just mentioned a moment ago, the guy was doing a deed in lieu at the bank. It wasn't done yet. The paperwork wasn't signed. And somebody bought that note and went and evicted him and threw all his stuff out into the street. And there's a disabled vet who was going to move. He was planning on moving, but it wasn't time yet. And it wasn't time for that investor to make that move. And like I said, that's where you want to be the lawyer on that side because you're gonna crush it. And of course, what happens is, and I'm not saying with this particular person by any means, but it is not uncommon that you see, oh, you threw my stuff out in the street. I had a fur coat and a diamond ring, and granted, I can't pay a $500 mortgage, but I had all these things. I had millions of dollars worth of goods in that house that you just threw out in that bin, and you can't prove that I didn't. And you don't really want to go down that rabbit hole,
Right?
You really don't.
In this day and age of, I hate to say high interest rates because, I know they're high, but they're not as high as they've been in the past. They're still not even above the 50-year average. But a lot of people are trying to get creative, and they're looking at ways that they can maybe try to assume some cheaper debt, or maybe they even, I've got a friend that recently, he had owner financed a lot of his properties like on 8% notes. Well, now the going rate on an owner finance is 12.
Right.
And he's not really a friend, actually, colleague, because I don't have friends like this, but he's basically like trying to get people out of the houses so he can resell kind of at market rate, right? And there's a lot of traps when it comes to that. Eviction, or I guess not even, taking possession is one of those things that people are messing up on. What are some other areas, maybe in the loan goes into default to note holder takes possession? What are some areas in between where people are making mistakes?
First of all, you got to consider whether or not there's a tenant, because sometimes you bought that note and it isn't the borrower that's living there. Somebody has a lease, and that changes your situation as well. So notifying them, what is the situation? Now I also see where they find out, oh, in fact, this happened just the other day in my office. Hey, can we work this out? We're going to do an eviction to take possession from the owner, but there actually is a tenant in there, and they've been paying the owner this whole time, and they're putting the money in the pocket and running off with it because they're not paying the lender. So can we not actually pull them out of the house, and can we work a deal with the tenant? And I said, of course you can. Why can't you do that? And so in this situation, why do you necessarily want them out? Maybe you can renegotiate with that owner or that tenant, whoever it might be. And so we're actually starting to see a little bit of that. People know the rent is going up. People know the mortgages are going up and rates are going up. You don't really want to lose where you're living. Moving's a pain. We all know that. I'm going to probably be doing that in a couple of years, and I will tell you that my wife is not really, she's happy. I'm like, I just can't fathom packing all this stuff up. So I feel horrible for the people that we're displacing. Right. I mean, it's not like I grew up wanting to do this for a living. It just sort of happened. But there are people that literally, maybe they can pay that. So why are you chasing them out necessarily?
Right.
Take a breath, talk to whoever's in possession. Maybe you can work a deal.
How important is it, say you're the new owner of this security instrument, note or mortgage, whichever way we want to say it. How important is it, in your opinion, to get someone, preferably a attorney that actually has experience doing it, to look over what you bought and really, or what you're thinking about buying? Best case, you actually do it before you own it, but let's say you didn't. Let's say you go to the auction, you get really excited, you hand your cashier check over, now you have this thing. I see a lot of people, Randy, they go to Facebook University and they start...
you get much smarter that way.
Yeah, they start asking a lot of questions in the group chat, and as a 20-something-year experienced investor and lender, I'm kind of like, oh no, stop it, go talk to the... How important is it to make sure, if not your law firm, that they talk to someone that has experience in that specific area of law?
A lot, and it's not my law firm or the people that do what I do generally, but due diligence through an attorney that knows what they're doing, very important.
One state specific you were kind of talking about earlier.
100%. Where did you buy it? Especially if you don't know the laws of, what would you say, South Carolina earlier?
Yeah.
And then, by the way, great state. Because there, if you're not an attorney with some connect, like they want to know you. They don't want me coming from Michigan and showing up in a South Carolina court with a northern accent, although people think I'm from the East Coast, but that's besides the point. It's not going to bode well in South Carolina.
Right.
But yes, the laws are very, very different than having a handle of that. But having somebody look over it, absolutely.
Ooh, first, especially... So I live in Texas, and all of my personal investing is in Texas. And I know it's county by county out here. I mean, because you don't want to be a Dallas attorney showing up in Rockwall County, because that judge just going to look at you, and you're losing before you even show up, if not from reputation, but from just knowing the way that small-town court works.
I actually, when I started practicing, I learned very quickly to keep some old, ratty kind of suits. I went out county, so I didn't look like a slick city. What is a city slicker? Which I guess is a phrase probably down here. Actually, now that we're sitting in Dallas, but you wanted to dress down, especially if you're ever going to be in front of a jury, but especially when you're in front of the judge. Try to play the role. He didn't know who that guy was. I was, just out of law school anyway. But yes, it does matter.
I'm in a lawsuit with a HOA out in with the county I was just talking about, and I'm using a Dallas attorney, but the Dallas attorney I'm using is very humble. Very, he comes across very non-threatening, which is characteristic of the county that I'm in. So he's, oh, yes, Your Honor. Oh, and it is funny. We're going against this other Dallas attorney that is the opposite, right? I mean, he rolls in, he's wanting to slam his stuff on the table and really take over the courtroom, and that judge just has no problem letting him know it's his courtroom.
Well, you would keep mentioning South Carolina. I mean, until recently, Hiram Murdaugh in certain parts of the states was a really good idea.
Until recently.
Yeah, I know, right? The recent events.
Yeah. So what are some things lenders are seeing, maybe nationally or from within your book of business, that are I'd say cracks in the surface, but What's it look like on the front lines of the defaulted servicing industry?
Well, I will tell you back in, I say '05, people talk about the Great Recession. I will tell you that being in Michigan, we were the front edge of that. I was already seeing it in '05, and I would go on a national conference and I'd say something, people had no idea what I was talking about. But what I was seeing then was you had brand new mortgages. These things weren't even a year old sometimes, and they were already in default, and they were going straight into foreclosure. And the rates were terrible, and the credit checks were terrible, and a lot of things. That is not what we're seeing these days. In fact, now there are so many programs out there that basically if you're going to lose your house, it's because you have no reason to stay there, and you have no way of ever paying for it, right? So there's so many loss mitigation opportunities, number one. But we're now foreclosing at things that some of these people have been paid in 3 to 5 years. That's a completely opposite situation that we had back in Michigan in '05, but for the rest of the world in '07, '08, '09,
Right.
where everything was like really very brand new. But this is old stuff, and the stuff that's moving, these are literally people that have been paid to 3 to 5 years. And if you're in New York, it might be 7 to 9.
Well, at RCM, we do 700 plus loans a month. And, I tell people from the stage all the time, it's like the worst thing you can do is either stop paying, and if you can't pay, stop communicating. Because at that point, as a lender, I have no choice. I don't know what's going on with my collateral. You won't talk to me. You're not paying me. I have no choice but take it to the next level.
We are frequently asked now to do the reach out on behalf of the lender. And some of it I have a problem with because they're asking us to send letters that, in my opinion, are a violation of the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act because of the way they word them. But if we're wording them and we're writing them or we're reaching out, there is more contact with a law firm than there is a servicer when people are behind because they're embarrassed or they consider a harassing call or whatever it is. But when they realize there's a lawyer involved, they're like, well, I better take this call or I better respond to this letter.
Right.
Now, like I said, it depends on what you're asking me to do, because a lot of times what we're asking from some of the bigger clients I have, it's not the way we want to communicate. And I politely suggested we do it a slightly different way. And usually I get very positive response to that. I hate to say this, but in my world, there are some attorneys, especially after 22 months of moratorium, where we were kind of all hemorrhaging cash there for a while, when we weren't moving anything, and people say, hey, I need you to do this. And they're like, okay, well, wait a minute, you're the attorney. Stop, think about that. Is that something you should be doing? Because maybe you should reread that letter. Maybe you should decide whether or not you're putting your firm at risk by sending that letter. But having us reach out in certain ways, in our terms, you're going to get a better response a lot more often than not.
That's a great place to take a break. I want to stick there and come back. I want to talk about being a yes man. So stick around. We'll be right back. At RCN Capital, we know that time is money. With our competitive rates and quick turnaround time, you can receive funding in as little as 10 days. We offer flexible payment plans to relieve the pressure of repayment process. Our team is experienced in making sure that you choose a loan that will suit you best. Get on the phone with the loan officer today by emailing info@rcncapital.com or clicking the link in our bio. Welcome back to Uncontested Investing. I'm Tim Harridge. Thank you for sticking around. Randy, I want to dive straight into finding advisors that are not yes men or yes women. Having been in business, not as long as you, but I'm getting gray hair. It's hard sometimes to find people that don't just want the business, but help make your business better. That will tell you, wait a second, that's a good idea, but we need to do it this way, right? You're off base. How important is it just in general, to go with your earlier theme, if you want to avoid being sued, does it mean a lot if the attorney's not willing to do what you're wanting them to do?
It is if they've got a legal justification not to do it, right? And that is the one that says, wait, stop, take a breath. This is the law. This is why we're going to do it this way and not do it that way. If I do it this way, you're going to get sued. I'm going to get sued. I have a former brother-in-law that used to sue people like me all the time because they were doing things they weren't necessarily supposed to do, at least in his mind.
And brother-in-law, set the record straight on that one.
Not because of this, though. I had nothing to do with that. Not that I know of, anyway. But you do see them. There are a group of attorneys that are out there looking to sue your viewers. They're looking to sue me. They think it's easy money. Now, there are some court decisions that say that it's maybe not as simple as they thought. There's, of course, a case called Obdusky under the U.S. Supreme Court that says that if in a non-judicial case anyway, we are not debt collectors as long as we're within the four corners of the law. But a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right now isn't within the four corners of the law. So we have to talk about what those things are going to be.
Well, let's just go straight there.
Into the law or outside the corners?
No, the four corners. What are the four corners?
Depends on the state.
Texas.
Don't know. Not licensed there.
Michigan.
MCLA 600.32 at SEC, which is really starts at 04, walks you through the process, tells you what you can do, tells you what must be in the publication, talks about timing, talks about posting, talks about abandonment as you keep going down, and I'm going page by page through the statute. And there's an abandonment statute. If you make an attempt, you find out that nobody's there, you can shorten redemption to 30 days. All that kind of stuff is in that statute. We have to publish for 4 successive weeks. A successive week in Michigan is defined from a case actually when Abraham Lincoln was president, believe it or not, as 7 complete days, which I had a competitor that was not doing that. He was publishing on the 1st, the 8th, the 15th, and the 22nd, and he would go to sale on the 23rd, and then when it came up for REO, it was up for sale, and I was getting a lot of REO work back then, and had a title company. I'm like, we can't sell this. This is not a valid foreclosure. I used to see a lot of that, actually. That firm's not doing that anymore, but this was an issue. So we talk about timing. We talk about like Bill and Sally being your attorney. Have you selected the right attorney? What criteria did you use? And are they doing a great job? Well, if they're going too slow, well, time is money, so they're not doing you any good. And it doesn't really get to your point, but time is money, and it doesn't matter to your viewers. But if you're going too fast, that's a little too less time. It's going to cost you some money. So we got to find that fine line and make sure everybody's doing it the right way.
Well, I think to the viewers out there, it's important. It's easy to learn strategies, specifically when you're following some of these national folks that are teaching a one-size-fits-all strategy from market to market. And what I hope you hear Randy saying is really get to know your state laws, really understand the difference in geographies where you're operating. And frankly, Randy, it's one of the reasons that if I invest outside of Texas personally, it's typically with someone that I know, like, and trust, and they have a history of operating in that geography. Because I know Texas laws really well, right? I have a stable of attorneys that I know, like, and trust, that I know when I'm dealing with an HOA issue, I can go here. If it's a foreclosure issue, I go here. If it's a error on an E&O, error on a title policy, and I need to go after the E&O insurance, it's this attorney. Like, they're all different. They all have different specialties, but I don't have that confidence in Detroit, right? Like,
you will when you call me.
For some reason, I just thought of Better Call Saul. Did you ever watch that show?
Oh, yeah.
Well, you will when you call me.
I actually used to work for a TV lawyer, actually.
This is like, forget.
I watch the ads now, and I'm like, was I really there? That's what we really did? That was back in my litigation days, which also is why I also don't think like other people in my industry. Right. I mean, a lot of people in my industry, in all honesty, and I'm not saying a bad thing at all. They're transactional lawyers. I think more like a litigator. And I think, where is this going to end up if something happens? And that's kind of the way I think, because that is my background. And that is how I started before I kind of fell ass backwards into this, if we can say that on TV.
Oh, it's fine. Don't worry, I'm the host. I approve that language.
I just got beeped.
A couple months ago, I had a good friend of mine named Bob Bloom. He's the asset defense team. Same thing. He started out as a litigator, and he was oftentimes the plaintiff's attorney. And he was used to coming after people. And he told me that he kind of got tired of it. This one time that he beat someone, that through the whole course of the trial, it kind of just became evident that his client was actually wrong, but the other attorney was just doing a horrible job. And, it almost sounds like what you just said.
You just said that I just had a flashback to a case where I'm sitting in my client's deposition, and they started pulling all these evidence, and I'm not going to talk about the details because this isn't the time or place. But I'll say that I found out that my client was a fraud in the middle of their deposition.
Right.
And I looked, what am I doing here right now? Out of this room right now. Please get me out of this room.
I want to represent Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac now.
And I was the plaintiff's attorney, by the way. I don't think I ever handled the defense case, actually. Other than, obviously, what I do now, because now we're doing it all the time, unfortunately, representing our clients, which are mostly banks and large institutional investors and mortgage servicers.
Are you in Illinois?
Yeah.
So I hear a lot of people, there's this circuit of gurus that go around and they teach at a seminar about buying tax liens and tax deeds in other states and buying, they'll teach you how to buy notes, but then they go buy this pool of notes and then they kind of parcel up and sell them off. And when I see these investors, they take their $100,000 of their IRA account and they buy this asset in either the tax lien, tax deed, or the note in another state with no real backbone. And it's a head scratcher for me. But you talked about, I really want to talk about ways to help people from getting sued. So let's just focus. Can you just picture that person that goes to these real estate clubs and is talked into buying a tax lien or a tax deed up in, or a foreclosed property in Illinois, and they're told, oh, don't worry about it, just foreclose on it, you own the house. What are some parts missing in that statement?
All right, two things before I start. One is I'm not licensed in Illinois, although my name is on the door.
Gotcha.
I am the owner. I'm not licensed, but the firm is there. I've got managing partners that manage.
Wait, pick a different state because I don't want to put you in a bad spot.
You can put me in Michigan.
Michigan.
That's what I'm saying. I'm actually personally licensed.
Let's say that same scenario happened and this slick talking guru in his suit gets somebody to buy a defaulted mortgage in anywhere in Michigan. And they're like, oh, don't worry. I mean, if they don't, you can just either work it out or take it back. Like, that's the stick.
Well, whoever just sold you that guru isn't an attorney, shouldn't be giving you legal advice, is actually breaking the law by giving you legal advice because they're practicing without a license. So clearly not somebody you should be listening to. And we all know that listening to anybody on Facebook is probably not a great idea either, right?
Unless you want restaurant recommendations.
Is that even true?
No.
I didn't think so. On Yelp, I've seen where people say that Red Lobster is the best seafood place in Michigan, and I can tell you for a fact that is not close to true. I'm not knocking Red Lobster.
Fair enough.
I'm not looking for sponsorship either. I'm just saying that
cheddar biscuits, though.
I understand that. I hear. In fact, we were driving recently, saw a giant billboard. Like, do you want to come back? And there was the biscuit. I think I'm like, yeah, all right, that is a good draw. I'm not gonna lie.
So, number one, if they're not licensed to practice law in the state they're trying to sell you something in, probably shouldn't listen to their strategy.
Well, you can start there. I mean, it's a starting point, but you want to follow up and do due diligence. What are they right? Did they mislead you? How do you know that they didn't mislead you? I mean, let's face it. There's a lot of bad people out there. And which way are they steering you? And for what purpose are they steering you that way? Are they benefiting by steering you the wrong way, or do they benefit you from steering you the right way?
Right.
And what is it about being steered the right way? How is it they're benefiting? Obviously, from an attorney standpoint, if I'm not steering you the right way, you've got a legal malpractice suit against me. So obviously, I'm always going to do everything I can to steer you in the right direction. And the guru doesn't have that same incentive, do they?
Right. No, not at all. So let's just say I buy a defaulted mortgage that's getting really close to foreclosure, a non-performing lien in Michigan. What are some things that I need to be aware
of? Where do you stand in title? Is it a first? Is it a second? Are there taxes that are due, for example? Is there a condo association? Because condo associations have, I won't get too political here, but they're not HOAs. An HOA is simple to deal with. Condo associations are not the same way, and their attorneys are kind of vicious themselves, actually. So where do you stand? You might want to pull title on that property. You might want to see where you stand.
Oh, but what the guru told me, if I buy it and I foreclose, I can wipe everything off title.
Well, you may. Depends on where you are. But if you're down here in priority, you're not wiping anything out. You're just going to grab some toilet paper and wipe yourself.
We're going to cut that out and make it the lead sound bite for the episode.
That's why I'm here, isn't it?
I love it. Keep going.
Well, you keep spitballing, I'll give you more of that.
No, it's just, I believe, and we saw it in 9 and 10, really, a lot of institutions would sweep in and buy thousands and thousands of defaulted mortgages. But then they would start parsing them out, right? Like even a little guy like me here in Dallas, I could get a tape. Mm-hmm. And once I got the tape, which just so y'all know, that's like an Excel file. I don't know why they call it a tape, but they call it a tape. Data tape. It's not tape. But
maybe in the 50s.
Yeah. It was like a microfilm.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, my gosh. So I'd get a tape and I'd start looking at it. But you're right. Hearing you say that, the real pro investors I worked with, first thing we do is, number one, send a driving team out to make sure that maybe the asset was still there.
That's a good idea.
But then the next was a massive title run. Like, figure out which ones, maybe there's an outstanding IRS lien you don't know about. Like figure out which ones we should pursue when the auction came around. Does your firm help people with that? Or where, actually, so let's peel the onion back even farther. Actually, we're going to stop, take a break, and then we're going to do that because that's going to be a longer than 2-minute conversation.
Probably.
Stick around. We'll be right back.
REI Inc. is a monthly business publication for real estate investors, covering all types of real estate investments and strategies. It is the most comprehensive real estate investment publication on the market. All of the articles are written by the top leaders in the industry, so investors are assured of always getting the best information possible. Each month, REI Inc. also profiles the top companies in the industry and provides insights and data into key regional markets. Along with their sister platforms, the REI Referral Network and Highest Invest, real estate investors have exclusive access to off-market investment opportunities and national acquisition and disposition initiatives. To learn more, visit www.rei-inc.com, where you can also access the REI Referral Network. Also, be sure and visit www.highest-and-vest.com to view the latest exclusive off-market assets with near immediate acceptance decisions and closing strategies. You can also email marketing@rei-referralnetwork.com to request more information.
Welcome back to Uncontested Investing. I'm Tim Harris. Thank you so much for swinging back by. Hey, I want to talk about title, but first it's time for the Money Minute. The Money Minute is my favorite part of the episode. It can be anything that you think will help maybe an attorney that's in litigation and wants to get into something different, an investor out there that's chasing yields but maybe has made some mistakes. I mean, you're an entrepreneur yourself, a young entrepreneur that's kind of out there looking forward to something. The bottom line is, I phrase it this way. Imagine the listener is going to get 60 seconds worth of advice, and this is it.
First thing we ever do in our office is we order title. We want to know where you're standing. We want to know if you have a first priority, a second priority. Do you know that you're buying a second? Is there an HOA lien? Worse, is it a condo and there's a condo association lien? Because that could become problematic. There are a number of things that you need to know. You may be buying something you really don't want to buy. If it looks like a pig and it smells like a pig, it's probably a pig. And that's the first thing we're going to do to find out whether or not you're buying a pig or not. That's the first thing we want to do. Secondly, as far as, let's avoid litigation. Let's not jump to conclusions saying, I owe this, because you may not own that. Where in the process is it? You've got to know where you are. I started saying this earlier. We're seeing investors jumping in, trying to evict people and throwing them out. They don't own the property yet. It's still in redemption. You're about to get sued. Let's save you money right there. So I'm not making you money there. I'm saving you money there. But keep in mind, you've got to know where you stand. You've got to know where you are. And you have to have an attorney advise you as to what is really going on. And the attorney has to be from the state where you're buying that note.
So in my career, I've been in and out of institutional roles, and I think the bulk of my work has been really with kind of the mom and pops out there. And I know there's such a gravitation right now towards, there's no supply out, right? So people are just looking for supply. They're, I'm going to buy defaulted notes, or I'm going to get creative finance. And it just always worries me, because at one time I had several hundred notes, and I just know the problems that come up once you kind of get out of your lane, so to speak. So I love to hear you say, like, let me help you not make a mistake. Let me save you money. It may cost you money to save money, which is, I think, people out there in the YouTube generation, that's hard to understand.
It is.
So how important is it? I love these things you're saying, like maybe you don't own it, maybe you don't have clear title. Are there any other like nuggets out there that people that are considering buying defaulted assets or something that falls in the defaulted servicing space, like any other nuggets or points that in our last 5 to 10 minutes you want to kind of drive home, people should be thinking about or aware of?
Well, we haven't even talked about BPOs, which is not what I do for a living.
Well, let's go.
But the truth of the matter is that how do you know what the value of the property is? You were talking about Detroit. There was a point where someone's house was worth $5,000. You just give it back to the land bank. You didn't want to foreclose on it. It would cost you more to foreclose than it would just to donate it and let it off.
Pop-up taxes would bankrupt.
Now, of course, Detroit has made a huge comeback, and some of those $5,000, $10,000 houses are now worth $150,000. So maybe you could have hit the jackpot. Depends on where you bought it. But knowing the value, which again is not something I can help with, but knowing the value, knowing the market is really important. So how the hell do you know what the market is in North Dakota when you're buying a note? Have you ever been to North Dakota? you have any idea what a house goes for? I mean, you've got a $150,000 note. What's the property? I would definitely look into professionals that do that. Again, not what I do, but knowing that value could save you a whole lot of heartache down the way.
It was one of those things I told the investor from South Carolina this morning. I said, you've got to get an as-is value of every asset, and you've got to make sure you're running your numbers on the lesser of the unpaid principal balance or the as-is value. And he was like, I never thought of that. I thought I'd just go off the note. And I'm like, I got some notes I'll sell you then, buddy. I mean,
from the time I started doing this, I would get phone calls. Can you give me a deal on a house? No. What do you mean? Well, I don't know the value of the house. I can look at the note. I got it right on my screen. I can see the mortgage. I can see what they lent you. I don't know the value of that house. I have no idea what the value of that house is. We go on Redfin. We go on Zillow. Personally, my own personal home, I can tell you those values are like this.
right.
I like one way more than I like the other because there's a huge spread between those two.
One's
For
the
my
buy it now price, and the other is the property tax protest price.
it's frightening. One number's frightening, and one number's awesome.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't rely on that either. Go hire somebody to go check that value for you. Even just a realtor or somebody else to do a BPO.
But so today,
Spoken professional opinion in case we don't know.
today on Facebook, a good friend of mine that runs a mastermind, Mike Hambright, he posted this picture in front of a burnout. He said, investing in Dallas is hot right now. And it was one of his rentals that caught fire over the weekend.
Oh,
Right? So that's the other thing, that hiring someone to go do a real BPO will, especially if it's a in-person, not just a desktop, right? You may want to make sure that 70 LTV, $100,000 note on the $150,000 Zillow house isn't really just a lot.
right. You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, but
Is it a burnout? I don't know.
But it's what you said, though. It's like, what's a good deal, right? Is a good deal a note? Could be. Or you could be paying, 3 times the value of the underlying collateral.
100%. The value at the time of lending isn't necessarily the value of right now. It could be one way or the other.
That's like, we're always like, we have to get a valuation when we do a loan. And sometimes people are like, oh, can't you do a desktop? I'm like, I mean, yeah, sure. Give me unfettered access to your bank account. I mean, it just makes no sense. Like, I want to make sure if you need $250,000 from me next week, maybe I should make sure there's a house there. I mean, call me crazy.
I think I'd follow your advice. I don't think you're the guru that's bundling them up.
No, I'm not. I can't stand to sell things to people because then you have to talk to them. We're going to close in on the top of the hour here in a minute. Anything that we haven't hit? I've enjoyed this. Likewise, very rarely is an attorney entertaining.
I like the fact that, by the way, you started by saying something a moment ago, saying early in my career I was institutionalized. I thought you were going to say institutionalized. Then you find out with the rest of the sentence, I was like, oh, wait, we went a different direction. I thought we were going to go.
There's a lot of my friends that think I probably should be institutionalized, Randy.
I was ready to jump on that. They just kept going. I'm like, oh, crap, I can't follow up on the joke, but I'm doing it now.
Well, you're doing a great job at it. Are there any points about the industry before we talk about your company that we haven't been able to hit on, or maybe some little tidbits you could offer the audience?
Well, let's talk about hiring an attorney in general, right? In this industry, it's are they Freddie and Fannie certified? And you may say, well, I'm not buying Freddie or Fannie paper. Why do I don't care? But you've got due diligence by Freddie and Fannie on these firms, right? There are qualifications that you must have. Do the firms meet those qualifications? Are we following those timelines? Because again, time is money. And, you may like Bob or Sally or whoever's doing your foreclosure work, but they're taking 6 months in Georgia or Texas, which are the 2 fastest states in the country. You've got a problem. And you're not working with the right person.
Right.
And you're not working with the right firm. So you've got to consider all those things. There's a number of factors to look at. Again, for me, my firm's in Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Colorado, and Wyoming. So I know what our timelines are compared to my competitors, and it's competitive out there. I mean, there are a lot of firms that do a great job. We're not the only ones, don't get me wrong. But there are some that we know don't do such a great job. And if time is money, and especially for a smaller investor, and that's your 401k, and that's your IRA or whatever it is, it matters. So take the time and figure out who it is you want to hire and why you're going to hire them and know what they're going to do for you.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I mean, especially even using that 401k IRA example, if you run up to 20, 30, 40 grand worth of extra fees or expenses or costs because you do something wrong, you may not have that money in that account. And now you've got serious issues. So I think, the message today is do your due diligence and make sure that your advisor is qualified to be an advisor versus hiring the cheapest out there that you can just get to push the paper.
Shaman is not the way to buy paper through.
All right. So Randall Miller and Associates.
Correct.
I'm not going to try to memorize the states. You do what all services does your firm provide?
Cradle to grave, which again comes with the Freddie Fannie designations, which means we handle foreclosure, eviction, bankruptcy, REO, litigation, loss mitigation, well, certain types of loss mitigation. What am I missing right now? That pretty much covers most of the gamut.
And on the loss mitigation notes, folks, so many small investors that I run into every day on the street try to handle their loss mitigation by themselves. They try to have their servicer of small note portfolios handle it. And I'll tell you from experience, once you get to the point where you're trying to save the deal or get the deal over, you really need to look at bringing your law firm in earlier versus later. It's saved me personally a lot of money on my note portfolios, and it protects you if there's accusations. Not even if you do something wrong as much as if you're accused of doing something wrong.
That happens quite often.
In securities, some funds I raised, I'll never forget one of the first guys that helped me raise a fund. I was talking about something, and he goes, Tim, you may beat the rap, but you won't beat the ride. And because legal battles, when you're not properly prepared, get really expensive really quickly.
You may win, like you just said. I mean, I can tell you right now, we have those little wormy attorneys out there just looking for us to do anything wrong and come after us, and a lot of it's bull, but it's still coming into my pocket when I have to pay my own legal fees, let alone you're paying your legal fees, your peers are paying their legal fees. So,
well, man, so if somebody's out there and they're thinking, I need to talk to this guy, how do they get in touch?
248-335-0800 is my direct line.
Ho, ho, ho!
R. Miller at millerlaw.biz, B-I-Z, or R. Miller at RSMA, Randall S. Miller and Associates, rsmalaw.com.
Man, I appreciate you being here. Thank you for taking your time.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it. That's it, folks. We are out of time today. I will see you next week. Remember, your network is your net worth, and today you've been growing both. We'll see you around.
Thank you for listening to Uncontested Investing. Questions about today's episode or the podcast? Email podcast@rcncapital.com and make sure to follow REI Inc. magazine on LinkedIn and Facebook, and RCN Capital on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. See you all next time.